Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. What night is it tonight? It is Monday night, and it is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. As always, we're going to introduce our esteemed panel of physicians who are here with us on today, starting with Dr. 100. This woman is known on these streets as Dr. 100
Now I can't hear Nikki. Can you? Okay.
I cannot hear you now. I do not hear Nikki.
Okay, I can see it going, so I know.
I am about.
All right, so my name is Dr. Maya 100, Dr. Maya Green, and thank you, Congressman, thank you, Nikki, for creating this space. I'm excited about a very important topic for tonight, and just as usual, I intend to keep it 100. So, thank you, Dr. Mason, for your leadership. Let's get into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. So that world-renowned urologist, the urologist of the stars who hates accolades.
Lost you, Nikki. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? I don't hear you, but I can hear me. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nikki and Congressman Davis, for putting together this platform. This is always a time, no matter what it is we talk about, it's always timely. Because if it helps to improve your understanding of any disease that you have, then the time is well worth spent. And I thank you for being able to be here.
Thank you so much. Well, to the man who makes this possible for us each and every Monday night, to the one who teaches us that true wealth is health, our Congressman of the Illinois.
Well, let me tell you, I'm just excited and delighted and always look forward to Mondays. I'm pretty excited because two of my bills were passed last week on the floor. And two of those two bills dealt with child welfare, and it was to reauthorize Title 4B. It's going to provide money, both of them will, to enhance the lives of children. And I'm pretty excited about that. We also debated my sickle cell bill today, and I'm confident that we will pass it. Just a matter of whenever the Republicans decide to put it on the agenda for a vote. So we've quite honestly been on a roll. I also, myself and a Republican lead, spoke to the National Chamber of Commerce, trying to help them understand that their members can hire individuals who have records and who need jobs. And we actually cited the experiences of Johns Hopkins University as a place where they've been doing great hiring these individuals. And their performances have been just as good as you could expect them to be, much better, as a matter of fact. And those who don't know, Johns Hopkins University Medical Center is always rated as the number one, the number two, or maybe the number three hospital in the United States of America. And they just do a lot of great, innovative things, and they're doing that. So I'll just stop with that. We are on kind of a roll right now. Looks as though we're going to actually pass a bill or a continuing resolution that will keep us from having to shut down the government. We've got a few days to do that, and it looks like we've got something in front of us that may get enough votes to do it. So all of these things go hand in hand. They never stop. They keep moving, and we just keep going around and round. And it's like the blues singers, and here we go around in circles, like the clouds up in the sky. So let's keep moving. Thank you, Dr. Mason. Thank you, Dr. Maya. And I'm sure if some others join us, we'll thank them too.
Well, thank you. We've been talking a lot about diabetes, and it's something that impacts us in a lot of ways. If you're not currently living with diabetes or never have, you do know somebody who has. In fact, about 10.5% of the U.S. population have been diagnosed with diabetes, according to the CDC. And about 88 million adults have prediabetes. Now, prediabetes, I'll tell you a funny story about that. My mom and I were out, and I wanted something sweet. This was when I was in my sweet tooth era, Dr. Mason. And I said, I got it. My mom said, "You're not supposed to have that." And I said, "Oh, no, I got prediabetes." My mom was diagnosed with diabetes. I said, "No, I got prediabetes." And my mama was like, "Oh, you got prediabetes? That's like being a little pregnant. It's only going one way. If you don't, it's only gonna go one way." That stuck with me for a long time. Specifically, tying it in the age commonly diagnosed among adults for diabetes type 2. Diabetes type 1 is diagnosed a little younger, slightly more prevalent in men, but definitely higher incidence in people of African descent, our Latin and Latinx community, our Indigenous American community, and Asian American populations, right? In fact, every year about 1.5 million new cases of diabetes are diagnosed. This is just in the U.S., right? We know there's we know there's a genetic tie to it, but that doesn't mean you have to have it. So, people in my family, my mom and dad were diagnosed with diabetes. That doesn't mean I have to get it. There's plenty of things I can do, nutritional change, exercise, things like that. And Dr. Mason always says, the screening is so important. Don't wait till you have the symptoms, because when you have the symptoms, which are usually thirst, hunger, frequent urination, being tired all the time, blurry vision, things like that, and slow healing the wounds. By the time you get those symptoms, we're already kind of down a path. Diabetes is something that impacts our whole body, not just the eyes and the urination, like I said, but also the kidneys, the heart, the nerves. It's all over your body. But tonight we've gotten a lot of questions about one particular part of the body, right? And that is where Dr. Mason comes in. He's going to tell us, Dr. Mason, we really want to hear about effects. Like last week, we talked a lot about prostate and how prostate can impact erection. It can impact our sexual lives, which is very important, right? There are 8 billion people on the planet. That means it's a lot of intimacy and sex going on, right? All of us are here because our parents did it. So I'm glad we're keeping it 100, and having these conversations. Dr. Mason, as a primary care doctor, when my patients come in and they start talking about, problems with erection, it's not usually listed as one of the symptoms, but automatically I go to also test for diabetes, things like that. From your experience and from what you've seen, how does diabetes impact a person's sexual life or erection, ability to get erections, things like that?
Thank you very much for the question, Dr. Maya. And we have to, and Dr. Maya, I'm going to ask you something because I want to ask you to back up a little bit, because we really need to understand what's happening with diabetes. And we really need to understand, and if you would take a moment, because I'm going to defer to you because this is what you do, but we talk about diabetes affecting the kidneys. Now, don't worry, we're going to get to the penis and everything else. But the reason it does that is because the way diabetes attacks blood vessels. So, Dr. Maya, can you plain ones in the eye and everywhere else? Could you talk about that? And then I'll come back to the question. That's okay.
Dr. Mason, the easiest way I talk about it is it does sugar, first of all, in the form of glucose, right, is something that sets our body aflame. It causes inflammation, right? And when I say inflammation, that's if I scratch myself and I get this swelling right here, that's on my skin. But imagine you have high glucose levels going all over your body, your kidneys, your eyes, your lungs, things like that, your blood vessels, right? And not only that, it gets stubborn. The way I explain it to my patients is, have you ever stepped in the summer? I used to remember somebody dropped a snow cone, somebody spilled some snow cone syrup, things like that. Somebody has something sweet and it gets left out on the sidewalk. It gets sticky. It adheres to things and it causes you to get stuck. It causes you to not want, not be able to move, and it causes a slowing down of a lot of things. Well, that's no different from how our glucose or sugar, high glucoses or sugars impact the body. Now, a lot of people think diabetes equals high sugar. I always tell people, people with, they say, oh, I got heart disease. How did you get heart disease? My parents had heart disease. Oh, I got a dysfunction in, my eyes. Both of my parents needed glasses. I needed glasses very early before I was 40. Diabetes, a lot of times genetically, there's an organ in the body called the pancreas. And whether that pancreas, the body says, hey, pancreas, there are parts of you I don't like, which is autoimmune, when your body kind of just starts to develop antibodies and attack itself. There's a point of that. It could be because of overload, like you overloaded the pancreas, it was working too hard, high glucose meals, things like that, and it has to push it out in the face of already being tired. Just like eating a lot of salt and you got heart disease and you swell up. Why? Because the heart is already overworked and now you're giving it more work. Those are factors that go into it. So what happens when the glucose is allowed to run kind of amok, for lack of a better word, in the body? It causes inflammation. The inflammation is all over the body. So if you remember, for those of you that started with us with COVID, right, we will say, hey, when you take the medicine, when you get the vaccine, when COVID enters your body, the virus itself isn't walking around attacking everything. It's the inflammation. It's the outcome of the presence of the virus in the lung that causes those kind of things. Well, with glucose, yes, the sugar sticks to stuff and it makes it dysfunctional, right? On my kidney, I'm trying to work. Sugar, like, no, I'm stuck to you, almost like having a piece of gum stuck on the bottom of your foot. It makes it dysfunctional. And not only is it dysfunctional, here comes the immune system attacking just everything, because the immune system knows this is dysfunctional. I got to clean it up, and it's trying to clean up. So you got that whole process where you have destruction and slowing down of the system, but also inflammation trying to come in and correct it, a chronic inflammatory condition, and it's due to the presence of glucose, that's happening. So that happens everywhere, and it happens in the blood vessels too. For those of you all that can recall a conversation we had about your blood vessels needing time to heal, diabetes also causes slow healing. We had a talk on sleep. And we say your blood vessels heal when you sleep. Well, if you have diabetes, your blood vessels try to heal and it heals a little slower. So every day that added glucose is happening. And that's what I tell them. Diabetes is dysfunction of the pancreas. It causes sugar to be in your body. Sugar is inflammatory to us. And that chronic inflammatory condition wreaks havoc.
Well, I thank you very much for that, Doctor, because that's exactly what's going on, Dr. Maya. And in my practice, when I did that many years ago, it was common, not uncommon. It was common for men who were diagnosed with diabetes. In fact, I would say if there was one diagnosis associated with diabetes, the most, it is diabetes, for the very reasons that Dr. Maya just said. Now, why is that? Why does the penis, and I'm going to go back to say, looking at a few other things. If your blood vessels are inflamed, and that means the blood vessel has to respond to the inflammation. It wants to heal. But at the same time it's trying to heal, it's being further inflamed because of what Dr. Maya just said in terms of what's going on. So what does that mean? Well, what happens is the smaller blood vessels are far, far more injured than the larger blood vessels from this inflammation. This is why diabetes, if you know anything about diabetes, you know that the places where a lot of these very small blood vessels go, which have a lot of work to do, are damaged. And guess where those things are? They're in the kidney, they're in the eye, and they're also in the penis. And it's there that when the blood flow, because the erection is caused by the blood flow being able to flow into the penis and then get trapped in there by the other organs, not just the organs, but the muscle tissue, to trap that smooth muscle tissue from the blood vessels, to trap the blood inside the penis. That's what causes the erection. But if this isn't working and it can't trap the blood inside the penis and the blood flows out, then the erection goes down. And all of the drugs that we used to use to help men with this problem, and you hear talk about it now, the Viagras, the Vitras, all of this, all these, all they did was create a circumstance so that the blood vessels could continue to send out the blood without it being blocked. And because these things were causing havoc all over the body. And that's why, if you notice, people have diabetes everywhere where you got little tiny blood vessels, the eye, the kidney. This is where this is going to do this. The penis, the small blood vessels in the penis, which are responsible for delivering that blood to the penis. And then that blood has to be trapped in those. I won't go into the gory details here, but that's where it gets trapped. And for those of you who can remember, when you had an erection as a younger person, you would notice that your penis would throb coincident with your heartbeat, because it was that pressure that was keeping the blood in the penis, creating the erection that allowed you to have intercourse. So that's what's happening. And so when you start, when you begin to have the complications of diabetes, where the blood vessels are now damaged and unable to respond as well, because in order for them to heal, the blood still has to get to them too. And when the blood can't get to them because the blood is blocked by this process, it can't heal as quickly as it used to, which is why oftentimes diabetics heal much slower and things of that nature. And this is why the blindness comes, or the problems with the eyes, because it attacks the small blood vessels. And we got a bunch of small blood vessels inside our eye. And when those are damaged, the eye doesn't work as well. When the ones in the kidneys are damaged, it doesn't work as well. And so that's what this is. These aren't different diseases. This is one disease. And what I always say, this is a foodborne illness. That's what it really is. You could talk about all the other things, but at the end of the day, one of the only ways, obviously you take your medication when you prescribe, but the other things that you can do is that if you follow a different kind of eating, you can help modulate, or you can actually, there are even books out there that talk about how you can reduce this problem with the sugar and actually begin to heal some of your problems. When we see people, and I stop after this, with this problem, the erectile dysfunction, we had to come up with other ways of blood being able to be brought into the penis. And that was through medications. Some of those medications had to be directly injected into the penis. Some of those medications could also be given orally. Unfortunately, they didn't always work as well as some of the others. And when it got to the point where the medicines that we would directly inject into the penis didn't work, or the ones that had been given oral didn't work, then we had to replace that system that allowed the penis to become rigid, which is when the blood used to fill up those chambers in the penis and it would get hard and you'd be able to have intercourse. But if the blood was leaking out, then it didn't happen. So we had to replace those and put in new, almost like new tires, so to speak, on the inside of the penis to do that. So I'm stopped. I've given you a lot to think about. And I want you to think about it because we can reverse this by doing the things that help to keep our diabetes under control. And I'll pass that back now to Dr. Maya, probably starting with what we eat. You're muted, Maya.
Oh, sorry about that, everybody. Thank you so much, Dr. Mason. Yes, what we put in our body does definitely affect our have a play in diabetes, because if you think about it, if you're putting high glucose or high sugars, we call them foods with a high glycemic index. Glycemic index is a ratio of, like, this one is, glycemic index of 1. This one has a glycemic index of 5. How sugary food is when compared to other foods. So if you're eating high glycemic foods, then you're going to have more glucose around your body to do all these things that Dr. Mason is talking about, right? And so what does it look like when you have a low glycemic index food? It looks like plants. For those people that do eat meat, you can eat meat, but of course, it's stay away from the char, stay away from the fat, things like that. But and then some people don't even know this: rice, pasta, bread, that cereal in the morning, things like that. A lot of those translate to sugars in your body. Corn, translates to sugars in your body. Now, different things like vegetables, they have sugars, but they translate a lot easier, and they're a lot easier for the body to digest, process. So you don't have all that glucose, all that sugar kind of laying around. So, for instance, my mom, like I said, she was one of the people that was diagnosed with diabetes. My mom is not a person that is on her way ever to take anybody's medication. So my mom, I used to say, oh, nobody controls it with just, nutrition intake. When you're diagnosed with diabetes, depending on the level, your doctor will give you a period of time and say, hey, let's look at how you do with activity and with nutrition intake changes before we go and have you on medicine, right? And if you're able to make those changes, people that make those changes are just monitored, a lot of times every 6 months, to make sure the body is tolerating those changes with just nutrition and exercise, right? Moving further, if for those of us that are not able to move to controlling diabetes on just nutrition and exercise, there are usually a pill, kind of the same process that Dr. Mason talked about for erectile dysfunction. If for those of us that are not able to control it on nutrition, exercise, and the pill, then you get injections. And above a certain threshold, we use a number called a hemoglobin A1C. So for those of y'all out there that check your sugars every day and they high, and then you eat right the week before, and then you show up to the doctor's office and it's low, we have a 3-month test called a hemoglobin A1C, and it's based on what we already talked about, that sugar will hang around in your body. We test your red blood cells. Sugar hangs on red blood cells as long as that red blood cell is alive. Red blood cells live about 3 months. So that hemoglobin A1C will tell me for the past 3 months, how has the body been handling sugar? And we test it. If you have a hemoglobin A1C above a certain level, that's when insulin starts. Why? Because not only is the stuff happening in the penis, it can happen to your brain, it can happen to your eye, it's happening to your heart, happening to your kidneys, and leaving it high that long causes dysfunction. Diabetes is a progressive what we call a progressive disease or progressive chronic disease, meaning if you were able to control it, you keep controlling. You can't just control it once and stop going to the doctor and be like, oh, I'm good. You know, think about it as that movie with the strong man when we were kids. He had a rope and he had a car, and that car was going in one direction. And every time he took his hands off the rope, the car went further and further and further. That's how diabetes is. Every time we don't control the glucose does its thing, you know. And so we try to come up with ways, whether it's nutrition, activity, then a pill, you know, then some shots. Now they have once a week injections that people can take if you're living with diabetes, just until you bring it under control.
You know, Dr. Maya, I'd also like to add to what you've said is that we need to stop thinking that we got a bunch of different diseases causing different things. Many times we just got to get to the right one that's really doing the most damage. And the other things that we got to look at, I know we mentioned food, but we also got to mention the stuff we drink. And according to a pediatric endocrinologist in California, Dr. Robert Lustig, much of the things that we drink, the sodas we drink, are sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. And high fructose corn syrup is super sweet sugar. And this high fructose corn syrup it's a double whammy, because high fructose corn syrup, according to the doctor, is addictive. It is addictive, and maybe Dr. Maya will talk about that. But these things are addictive for a reason, because they want you to continue to consume these things. And we need to be sure that you know everything that you can do to help protect yourself with this condition. Can you ever get rid of type 2 diabetes? There are people who do it. It takes a lot of discipline, and it takes really how bad do you want to be well? How bad do you want to do well? Because unfortunately, the medication you're taking, which is important, you got to remember, it doesn't heal the problem. It doesn't fix the cause. It only keeps the number. It may control it a bit, and it's important, but it doesn't fix it. So when Dr. Maya talked about eating differently, when you eat the right kinds of foods, it's particularly vegetables of any kind, you will find out that you will do much better. And the high fructose corn syrup is very, very addictive, and it's in so many things that we eat and we drink. And we've got to understand that once we start destroying so many of our filtering cells in our kidneys, we don't get them back. And then you end up, particularly if you add high blood pressure to that, and I'll ask Dr. Maya to comment there too. If you add high blood pressure to that, now you got the double whammy. And what that's going to do is help destroy your cells in your kidney even faster. And why do you think in our community you see so many of these dialysis centers popping up all over the place? And that's because we are sitting there because our kidneys are damaged and they can't do the work anymore. So we have them getting the work done by a machine. And that machine, that dialysis machine, which takes about 3 hours or so, is doing the work or doing the job, not as well, but doing the job that the kidney normally would do. Don't also forget, your eyes can get damaged from this. So it's really, really, really important. And I tell you, once you start getting, and I can tell you, having treated many men with this problem, and many men I had, some were able to use the oral medications. Some of the men could not use, it did not work for them. And they ended up having to take injections directly into the penis of a medication that would help do what normally would happen if their cells had not been damaged by the diabetes, and allow the blood flow to go into the penis and create an erection. And then sometimes we ended up having to put in artificial implants into the body of the penis, and it could be inflated. It was a 3-piece device. You can look it up online, and maybe one day I'll actually show it on this show. But I did a lot of these operations putting in these implants, and the implant consisted of 3 major components: a pump deflate valve, a reservoir to keep the fluid, and the 2 chambers that went into the penis where the water would be where the fluid would be pumped to and create an erection. This sounds like it's pretty serious, and it is, but you have some more control than you think. And unfortunately, too much of our food has too much sugar in it. And the good sugars, like the ones that are in fruits, those are the ones that we need to do more to think about. So I'm going to pause right there, Dr. Maya, and talk about why this is why, and I'll just say this: the damage to these small vessels is why we start losing toes, ankles, legs. And Dr. Maya, because it's all this, it's not a different disease. It's the same disease doing different things, but it's not different disease. It's the same. And if you have your diabetes uncontrolled, you will be losing your erectile function. You will have problems with your kidney. You will have problems with your eyesight. Dr. Maya?
Yeah, Dr. Mason, it really got me thinking. You talked about what's going on in our neighborhoods and how these things are compounding. Like, so you mentioned high blood pressure. High blood pressure is the pressure your heart feels when it's trying to pump blood through your body, right? So if this is the heart, I always tell my patients, remember when you was little and you tried to blow up that balloon and the balloon was too small, the little part when you blow in was too small. So the pressure, and you felt that pressure when you went like this for more than 5 seconds. Well, if this is your heart and that little tube is your blood vessel, imagine what the heart feels when it's trying to pump against pressure 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It can't just stop doing it like you did with your mouth, because if your heart stops, that's called a heart attack, right? So it can't just stop. That combined with the destruction of the blood vessel, it's just having a hard time. It's having a very hard time healing. It's having a very hard time getting blood through that vessel. And that's combined with each other. But I want to talk about something you said: social determinants of health. When you look around in our neighborhoods, places where you can get all the sugar you want, a lot of,
cheap,
yes, but low cost, and salt and things like that impact your heart and your blood pressure. Places where you can get that are cheap, so we have to think about what we're going to do for our community to create alternatives, because I don't know that other people are going to create the alternatives for us. I don't know that the people are going to create the alternatives for us. So we got to think about it. I know, Dr. Mason, you're doing something with what do you call it? The pharmacy, FARM?
God's Pharmacy.
God's Pharmacy. I don't know if you want to, if you even can talk about it or want to talk about that right now.
Sure. I mean, it's basically what we're doing is, it became very clear to me over the years that the major problem, it wasn't anything wrong with Black people. We always talk about Black people got more of this, got more of that, got worse this and worse that. But a lot of it is attributed to what we eat. And guess what? White people have it too. We're not the only ones getting kidney failure. We're not the only ones needing dialysis. We're not the only ones who are having congestive heart failure. We're not the only ones whose toes and what have you and parts of their feet are being amputated. No. Diabetes, these diseases are equal opportunity things, and they don't discriminate. They do not discriminate. And of course, the soda, I always talk about this. High fructose corn syrup is very addictive. And if you add the combination of the caffeine, which is addictive, which is in much of the soda, and the sugar, which is addictive, or the high fructose corn syrup, you got a double whammy. You got a double whammy. And you need to think about, we have to think about that and understand that there's nothing wrong with Black people. You know, we always talk about Black people got more of this, Black people got more of that, Black people got this and got that. Well, if you ask the question why, and you get to the question why, it's not because we're necessarily Black, it's because of the things that we do. And we pass those habits, unfortunately, along. And we do some of them, to Dr. Maya's point, is because sometimes our choices are limited. But the other thing I would say, if we go back and eat like our grandparents used to eat more of, with more beans and more greens and more of those sorts of things, and less, and then of course, a lot of the fried foods create problems too. So we really do need to look at this far more holistically than we're doing it. And there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with us. It's what we eat. And sometimes our circumstances contribute to the choices that we meet. And Dr. Maya, I'll pass it back to you.
Well, you know, right before we go to Dr. Maya, just want to say hey to Yolanda Williams, who's here. She says good evening to all. To Sister Bonnie, she says good evening to all. The Connie Taylor is here, and she says good evening to everyone. Audrey J. Cox is here, and she's saying good evening. I want to say hey to Deborah over at Coleman's Barbecue. They are all sitting there watching, and they're saying hello and good evening to the Congressman just as well. To Nellie Purnell King, who is here, she's saying hello to Alderman Pat Dow. Alderman Pat Dow is here. She's saying hello to Juan and Only, who did a fantastic job at the DNC. She's saying hello, and she is here. So, hey, Juan, how are you? I am having some technical difficulties, and I'm going in and out. But Maya, I wanted to share this question with you. We have a question from one of our viewers that actually asked the question, how does diabetes affect sickle cell?
So much like what Dr. Mason has already said, it's compounding. So if you have sickle cell, now you have, in addition to it, all of it is happening, a lot of it is happening in the blood vessel. Okay, all of it is the blood vessel. So now you have a blood situation where your blood vessel is inflamed, right? The blood cells initially can't really do everything they're supposed to be doing. But now you have, on top of that, sickle cell. So I have inflamed blood vessel. This is my blood vessel. It gets inflamed. So when it's inflamed, it swells up. So I really don't have all the space between here that I normally would have. This is my blood vessel. Y'all see that I'm looking at the blood vessel. Okay. All the space. So really, because it's inflamed, got this much space. And so sickle cell is, and then it affects diabetes, affects your heart. So a lot of times, not only that, I'm not able to get the level of oxygen to the blood cell. Where's my blood cell? To the blood cell. I use this. Blood vessel. Blood cell. This is my blood cell, y'all. And now that blood cell is trying to get through and remain in the disc-like shape, because this friction is better when I'm shaped like a circle as I go through the blood vessel, right? If I'm shaped a certain way. But what happens with sickle cell? If you don't have enough to carry them, bloop, it'll, oh, I got a dental thing. It'll, bloop, it'll turn into something like a sickle. And now I'm trying to go through, and I'm causing pain, especially as the blood vessels get smaller and smaller, the blood vessels in my toes, the blood vessels, in those areas. But over time, because of swelling, it just starts doing that. And that scraping causes a lot of pain. Yes, it's a small area, but more and more over time, that's when a lot of times you talk about people, when they're talking about they're going into sickle cell crisis, things like that. So when you bring it all out to one sentence, the presence of uncontrolled diabetes does set the stage for more frequent and more intense crises. Now, whether a person feels it in their body because of nerve damage that the diabetes has also caused is a different story. But more intense and more frequent crises is what happens when those two things are together. So that's what I have. Okay, let's see. I don't know if did Nikki, I don't know if Nikki said hi to Connie Taylor. Good evening, everyone says. Bonnie Smedley says good evening. Yolanda Williams says good evening. Miss Deborah Coleman. Oh, yep, we got Deborah Coleman's barbecue and Nellie King. Good evening, everybody. I'm glad we're having this conversation because diabetes is definitely something that we're seeing in our community. We're starting to see it more and more. And honestly, I'm starting to see it at younger ages. Now, remember, we told you it was a chronic disease, so it wants to go down a certain space if we don't hold it. Now, what if you start that process younger, right? It ends up affecting our quality of life over time, right? So, that's why I think it's very important kind of to talk about this. Now, since we're on sickle cell, I don't know, Congressman, if you can talk more about what kind of has evolved as far as things being available to help people with sickle cell. I don't know what.
I can, but I really wanted to ask a question
Okay.
relative to obesity and diabetes, and how does obesity play into the diabetic arena?
Definitely. It contributes to something that we always, you don't have to be obese to have cardiometabolic syndrome, but obesity definitely does contribute to it, right? So when we have obesity, we have a lot of adipose tissue. Now we're bringing in a different cell. We're bringing in our fat cells, right? And fat cells are meant to store fat in case we need it in moments where we have to expend energy or moments where we're in starvation. It's not meant to store fat and grow and grow and grow, because if I'm in the body, this is my abdominal cavity with my pancreas, my liver, my liver, things like that. As this fat cell grows, and it, of course, there's millions, trillions of them, it is now impinging and causing less space for my organs. So now, and then infiltrating my organs, right? We know that obesity can also increase the likelihood of fatty liver and different things like that. But the way specifically obesity relates to insulin resistance is it causes that whole thing to go off. It causes my hormones and a lot of other things. It causes my ability to process insulin to be thrown off. Here's what I see in the clinic. And Dr. Mason said you should not, you're not gonna wait till you see it, you're gonna get screamed, right? But if you ever see people that start to get, I had it, but I started exercising, but I used to have more this like dark striping right here and right here, and then certainly around the back of the neck and in the creases. That's called acanthosis nigricans, right? And that is a sign that there's a lot of insulin resistance. I do see it more when there is obesity. Obesity causes a lot of, it adds to the dysfunction that we're already talking about, right? So you got your organs trying to function. They're not functioning at top capacity because they're inflamed. They also can't get enough nutrients because the blood vessels are inflamed, right? And now I have this obstruction because the fat cells are growing, impinging upon that organ's ability to function and move like it wants to, right? It also, obesity slows you down, right? It's easier definitely to walk, run, have activity, if you're carrying around less weight, right? The other way, now this is, Dr. Mason said it is, and I can go down a rabbit hole with this, but Dr. Mason said, it's all basically one disease. And yes, the other thing that obesity does that contributes to diabetes, right, is obesity also increases a person's decreases a person's likelihood to be able to sleep, right? Part of the obstruction of obesity obesity can lead to sleep apnea. Now, I don't know if you all remember, stick with me, We did a whole talk about sleep apnea and what happens with sleep apnea. You know, obesity is one of the major causes. And what happens with sleep apnea? Your body doesn't heal. And what doesn't heal? Your red blood vessels. And what does diabetes impact? Your your blood vessels. And what does diabetes impact? Your blood vessels. So it decreases your ability to heal in your wounds, in your feet, messes with your nerve. But obesity also decreases your ability for your blood vessels to even heal from the damage that's being done. So now you're locked in a cycle where it's almost a spiral down. I know all of this sounds really tough and really overwhelming. What's beautiful about it is a lot of this stuff, like, sure, companies make millions, billions even of medication, but it doesn't have to be that way. A lot of the stuff that helps with diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, the things we talked about, you can have for free. It's activity. You don't have to go to the fancy gym. You don't have to go to the East Bank Club. Dr. P used to say you can literally practice getting on the floor and getting up. Start practicing getting on the floor, getting all the way down, and just getting all the way up 10 times a day, and then build from there. You can do that in your own home. That's going to reduce the poor outcomes of diabetes, high blood pressure, sleep apnea, obesity, all of it in itself, right? So you have that available to you. It
And
also, go ahead, Dr. Mason.
No, I just wanted you to, while we were talking about obesity, you know, we really do need to talk about particularly obesity, that central obesity, where we're talking about what we call our stomach, but the abdominal cavity, that kind of. And when we start having, and particularly as we talk about erectile dysfunction and diabetes, particularly in men, when you develop a lot of this central obesity. And I had a little test that I would say, I don't know if I can say it, Congressman, on the show, but I had a simple little test for, you don't have to always have a scale. Sometimes there's some very common sense things you can do. And I would say that, when you take a shower or you take a bath and you get out the shower or the bath, and, before you put your clothes back on, just stand up straight and look straight down.
Yep.
And if you can't visualize everything that should be there, in other words, you can't see it, that's telling you that you've already got a very serious problem. And you need to think about that. In addition to that, that obesity, to what Dr. Maya was talking about, because of that obesity, what we call central obesity, it can create obstructive breathing. So you hear people at night sleeping and they actually stop breathing. So this is real. I'm not talking, I don't spend any time talking about fluff. It's about reality. And I used to say to my men, if you stand straight up and after you get out the shower and you look straight down, and especially if you can't see your feet, you got big problems. That's morbid obesity. And if there are other things you can't see that you should be able to see, that's other problems. And I'm just trying to give you something simple, because I don't want us to, one beautiful thing about what the congressman's doing here is making sure that you get information in a way you can understand it, because it doesn't make any sense to do it if you don't understand it. And that's why he's to be congratulated for continuing to have this program, so we can come and make sure you understand, because there ain't no cavalry coming. If we don't make a decision to eat better, if we don't make a decision to move, if we don't make a decision, when I say eat better, we need to stay out of some of these fast food places. I know many of us don't cook, but we can. And eating well doesn't mean it's expensive. Last time I checked, Congressman, pinto beans, lima beans, great northern beans, those things aren't very expensive. And we can also get greens and different things like that, and more vegetables to eat. And I grew up one of 10 kids. in Inglewood. We didn't have a lot of meat to eat. We didn't eat a lot of processed foods. You know, if it wasn't natural like that, we didn't usually eat it because we don't know when it's processed. You don't know what it's like. And I'll say this and stop. And the congressman was very supportive of us when we did this. It was so important to me that I really think that the medical model is too antiquated and backwards. What we used to do, and the congressman remembers this, when we put I got trainers and I got equipment and I got people to actually and send the people who were not just obese, but anybody suffering with anything. And we had a prescription for them for the exercise. And then what we did is we had a place for them to go to get it. And then we had people there to help them understand how to do it without hurting themselves. Congress, I won't put you on the spot, but I'm sure he remembers when we did that. He was there. The congressman has always been on the forefront, on the vanguard of anything that is going to help the people. And you can make all the excuses you want to, but at the end of the day, it's on you. You know, ain't no cavalry coming. God ain't gonna send no lightning bolt down to do nothing. If you don't do nothing, nothing's gonna get done. And you got to love yourself enough to want to do something good for yourself. And you have to resist some of the temptations that we're given. But you know, if it's nice, you don't need to do what we did. You could just walk. You know, I would caution seniors in certain neighborhoods. The sidewalks are a little uneven, so just be careful. Or you go someplace smooth, or the mall, or someplace where you can walk. And I thank the congressman for having this, and I thank you, Congressman, when you came to the facility and saw what we were trying to do, because I really wanted, and I may do that again, because we need to incorporate that as part of what we do in medicine, not as something extra, but it needs to be part of it. And I'll stop right there because I get excited about this.
Well, I think we got time for one more question. If I could, why is insulin so, we talk about getting the cost down for insulin, and what does insulin actually do in terms of the treatment for diabetes?
I'll leave that to Dr. Maya. Dr. Maya, you're muted.
Okay. So insulin, first of all, insulin is there's endogenous insulin and exogenous insulin. Okay, that's just a fancy name for insulin that your body made by itself and insulin that you get other places, right? And so our body, without kind of on a functional day, we're talking, there's no diagnosis of diabetes, nothing, going on that's causing disease or called a disease. Insulin, there's a load of sugar. Insulin actually causes and helps the process of the sugars, so they don't sit around the body. So they get uptaken into the muscle, into different places, right? Insulin tells your body, hey, listen to the muscles, listen to the processing, make the processing go. It actually directs the processing of making sure the sugars and the different things don't sit around. They're passed through or taken up, uses energy, that kind of thing. That's what insulin does. It's like the director, right? Okay, that's endogenous insulin that our body makes. Exogenous insulin, when the pancreas is where insulin is made. When the pancreas is not making that insulin and causing that process, we need help. Just like Dr. Mason said, when people's kidneys don't work, you get this big machine. Well, when your insulin isn't made, you need help. And that's why you take it during a certain time of day. For those people, that's the reason you take it after a meal, because then you have your sugar low, then you put your insulin in there to take care of it. Okay. And so if the pancreas is, for whatever reason, not working, a genetic predisposition for the pancreas to go out, or there's just been overwork and damage to the pancreas, or something else happened to it. If the pancreas isn't doing it and it's not making, and the cells that make insulin aren't making insulin, then we use exogenous insulin. And so that's why it's important, going back to nutrition and exercise. Congressman, I just want to make sure I answered the question adequately before I go into nutrition and exercise in this scripture my brother sent me. I was going to ask y'all about it. It was a scripture, and I'll look it up. And this could be, I see the time, so this can be mine until next Monday. My brother sent me this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say what you were saying is so important, because in order for people to understand the value of things, they got to know, or it helps to know what it means. Mm-hmm. Just saying that somebody did something and you don't know what that really means, you don't get the full value of what it is that they did. And if you know what it is, you know, like I couldn't see a senior citizen who didn't just appreciate that they don't have to spend more than $35 a month for insulin, if they know what insulin is actually doing. And so any senior citizen that ain't hip to what this $35 limit is, I mean, I wouldn't care if Cyplucas was running on the other side. I'd have to support people who manage to do that.
Yep. And so without insulin, actually, if you think about it, it speeds up that process of heart failure, kidney failure. People, you know, you see people with their legs, you know, being amputated, things like that. That process speeds up dramatically, because insulin is the one that's like, we got glucose. It's going to cause all this inflammation. We're not having that today. Boom, boom, boom. Listen to the muscle, go to the muscle, get used for this, go out the body. It tells it like, hey, you know, you had your time in the body, go ahead and move, you know. And without that, it's allowed to sit and fester and inflame our body. Glucose is. So just to be clear, that's what's happening. Nikki, you on? Because I ain't got to the until next Monday. Oh, until next Monday. All right. I was just getting there. Okay. Until next Monday. We talked about a lot of stuff, and I know we've talked about it ad nauseum, but you know, think about how many people are now, you know, living with diabetes and not yet moving to the point where they are putting less glucose or the, you know, inflammatory agent in their body. So my brother sent me this morning. My brother's not like a heavy preacher, but it hit this morning, is going to hit today. They were talking about in John chapter 5, how people were gathered around a pool to get healed. And Jesus walked up to a person and said, hey, you know, how come you're in the pool? They said, oh, because I can't walk, you know. And Jesus said, okay, you know, because nobody's there to help me. Nobody's, you know, and that man, if we don't watch it, gave a reason why, you know, like, I can't do this because of this, a whole bunch of things, you know. And think about Jesus asking, like, why aren't you in there? And that was a test. Like, before we get the healing, I want to make sure that you actually are ready to walk away from the things that made you sick. You know, like, before, okay, the pool right there, you right there. Tell me the reason you're not in the pool, you know? So if vegetables are right here and exercise is free at home, tell me the reason you're not doing it. Before you ask for healing, make sure you're ready to walk away from the things that brought you illness.
All right, Dr. Mason, you're until next Monday.
Well, it's part of, first of all, let me thank you, the Congressman, and you, Nikki, for doing this, and Maya for the wonderful comments you were able to make. And the one thing I would say until next Monday is that to Dr. Maya's point, I'm using John 5 verses 2 through 9 myself, because the question really is, do we want to be well? That's what Jesus asked the man. Do you want to be well? And then he told him, because he'd been laying down there, stand up, take up your mat, and walk. And that means we got to change our perspective. When you laying down, everything looks insurmountable. But when you stand up, now it doesn't look so tall and so formidable. And all I'm saying is that what we try to do on this show is help you stand up, help you see that the things aren't so formidable that you can't do anything about it. And we want you to walk, stand up and walk, because we want you to be well. That's all. But you have got to participate.
Well, now, Dr. Mason, that participation portion has taken me to the young woman who had the issue of blood in the Bible. And all she wanted to do was touch the hem of the garment. She didn't have to touch the person, but her faith got her there. And touching the hem of his garment made her whole. Am I correct? She also he stated that he felt and knew that someone had touched him, the simple end of his garment. So we then went from being by the pool to being in the pool to standing up to receiving your deliverance by touching that hem. This has been a hot show tonight, and it's all because of our very own congressman who constantly teaches us. He reminds us that true wealth is health. Well, Congressman, take us home as always.
Well, I think next week we better ask some of our theologians to interpret some of those actions, but they are actions. You got to do something. You got to at least touch if you don't do anything else. So you got to follow some of these prescriptions that are being laid out. I would just hope that maybe week after next, since we've got some action, that we would spend that Monday really talking about the discrepancies in maternal and child health. I've been listening to a lot of conversations relative to the different candidates and their positions relative to abortion or relative to what is actual health care and the health care needs. So maybe we can have some specialists in gynecology to be on with us, especially to talk about the whole question of the right to make determinations and what it really means for people to be able to do that. So until next Monday, thanks to everybody for making this Monday a very interesting and exciting one. There are a lot of good things going on in many places, and we've just got to try and get as much information to the people so that they have the basis for making decisions. And I want to congratulate Henry Taylor, who is retiring after spending many years as the CEO of the Miles Square Health Center. And I think they're actually having a retirement activity for him on Friday afternoon. I don't remember the exact time, but I do know that I saw something. And if anybody wanted to make sure they had the correct information, they could call our office, because I know Josie has it on my schedule, and she could give you the accurate information. So until then, thanks all. Have a good night, and we hope to see you next Monday. All right, so long.